From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Wow, this is exciting. So, good morning. I'm Pam Jackson. I am the director for the Library of Congress Center for the Book, and I'd like to welcome you here this morning. And thank you very much for being here. Welcome you to the Library of Congress and to the Coolidge Auditorium, and I'd like to welcome the staff and leadership of the National Campaign to Stop Violence. I'd like to welcome the students, the parents, guardians, educators, leaders, Department of Education officials, foundation officials that support the program, the Do the Right Thing Challenge program. To my Library of Congress colleagues, I thank you for your presence here as well. It's an honor to have you all here, and it's a privilege to be in your midst. It's a part of our vision here at the Library of Congress that we are the chief steward of the record of knowledge for America and for the world, thus creating a springboard to the future. And the future that I hope to see is one of compassion and courage, one of industry and innovation, one of remarkable accomplishment and achievement, one of peace and harmony. A part of the library's central mission is to provide the American people with a rich, diverse, and enduring source of knowledge that can be relied upon to inform, inspire, and engage, and to support intellectual and creative endeavors. The future I want to live in is one where societies thrive and flourish, because we live in caring communities, strong, educated, empowered. We live as individuals contributing to one another's intellectual and creative endeavors, consistent with the library's mission, a future where we care about each other's success and growth and development. The future I want is one in which each of us, every one of us, values human life, honors it, respects it, cherishes it. And I'm clear today, we're here today in this room because that future has yet to be fully and completely realized. We're here today in this room because some of us have been hurt and harmed. Others of us have suffered and been helpless or silent. Still others have been the source of hate and injury. It may be you or the person next to you, but really, it's all of us. You all, in particular the authors of the letters in this fabulous program and book, have my deepest appreciation for your strength and for your courage. I'm grateful you're here to share your stories, to add your writings to the collections of the library, and to promote peace. The Library of Congress Center for the Book, which does include the Young Readers Center and the Poetry and Literature Center, promotes books and libraries, literacy and reading, poetry and literature. And we do so because we know they are the source and the fuel for informed and engaged societies and communities. And we also do so because we know they are the absolute best weapons against intolerance and against ignorance. The Center for the Book was established by public law in 1977 and incorporates several public-private partnerships designed to implement programs and awards such as this one. And we're a part of the National and International Outreach Division within the Library of Congress. So it's our mission to nurture and empower the network of organizations with whom we partner to strengthen our capacity to serve communities and to provide the broadest access to the vast, diverse, and rich collections of the Library of Congress. We are proud and completely thrilled to count the Do the Right Thing program as our partner and our friend. And it's clear from my reading of these letters that we can win the battle against hate and violence and intolerance because of who you are, your willingness to shine brightly and be your best self, and your willingness to forgive and have compassion. So I'm profoundly convinced that the future that I said I wanted, that will be because you're here today. Thank you for being here. Now, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dan Callister, Chairman of the National Campaign to Stop Violence. Chairman and its founder, I just learned. Thank you so much. Please welcome Dan.
Thank you, Pamela. It's a great one that you were willing to let us come here and continue our partnership with the Center for the Book. I had no idea how eloquent you are. Very, very impressive speech. And I would like to say hello to an old friend up here. John, would you just stand up for 1 minute? John has run the Center for the Book and been our host at this event for many years now. He's taken over as historian for the Library of Congress, and we wish you well in this new position, John. Now it's my opportunity to invite 4 of our students to read from their writings that are in our book before we make the official presentation. The first one is Stormy Montez. This is an 8th grade student from Coastal Bend, Texas, Fulton Middle School. Stormy?
I started from my sleep. I could hear the roaring boom in my father's voice, like a train crashing down the tracks, yelling then hitting the screams. The screams so loud and vulgar. I can see him hitting my mom over and over again. This wasn't the first time they often fought. This time was different. My mom was hitting back. My sister and I watched, crying and scared. We didn't know what to do. When my mom and dad saw us, we were told to return to bed. In the morning, my dad was gone from our lives. We ended up losing everything and having to move because the money had been spent on drugs. Sadly, I know my father abused drugs and was abusive, yet some days I just wanted to say I love you. I wish this was the end to my miserable story, but surely things got worse. I was dreadfully bullied starting around the 3rd grade, but began to gain weight, and I no longer looked like the other kids. Made me a perfect target. I tried so hard to let my words not let me get me down, but fact is I felt worthless, like a burden to everyone around me. I wanted it to finally stop. I remember the words that my grandpa told me, looking in my eyes, be strong. It wasn't long after I started to bully other kids. It was interesting how it happened. I was finally accepted by the cool kids. Deep inside, I knew they weren't my friends. They just enjoyed watching me get in trouble. I felt horrible when I bullied them because I know how it felt. I understand their pain all too well. I had to break the circle. I needed to work on myself and needed help. It was taking a lot of work, but I am much stronger now. So why do we behave like this? Hurting others, ourselves feel better, acting violently by hitting and injuring. Honestly, there are countless causes for violence. Most people do what want to make poor choices, but we learn from what has been modeled, be it positive or negative. Behaviors from violent video games or movies in order to prevent acts of violence. We must correctly work and help people feel safe, cared, and supported, also helping and develop healthy sense of self-esteem and self-worth. I could have become a bit bitter about what I've been through, but I'm not. Instead, I've learned to forgive and whatnot. I will not be held hostage by my past. My slate is clean. These obstacles have been painful. Today can show use these experiences to help the next generation from being harassed and bullied. Though may not, I will be one person helping other youth to see their value. I personally challenge each of you to break the cycle and help influence someone for the better.
We'd like to now hear from Brenda Flores. Brenda is eighth grader in Brightwood Education campus in Washington, D.C.
Violence is a word with a big meaning. Most of the people in this world use violence to resolve their problems. When I think in the word violence, the first thing that comes to my mind is conflict, death, war, a lot of negative things. In my opinion, it's not necessary to use violence to resolve a problem. You can talk and find a way to solve your problem without hurting or killing someone. Violence has affected my life because I used to live in El Salvador, now classified as the most dangerous country in the whole world. I couldn't go to school because I was scared to get killed on my way. I couldn't play outside because my mom was scared that I could get kidnapped. However, violence has changed my life in a good way. As in El Salvador was too dangerous, I had to immigrate to the United States. The first day that I got here, I thought it was gonna be really hard to me because I didn't speak English. And I knew that everything was going to change. But now that I know the language, I have more opportunities than in El Salvador. The causes of the violence are most of our parents be working all day to give us what we need. But they don't give us enough time to talk to them and say what we feel, what type of friends we have, who's around us. From the age 13 to 19, it's important to get orientation because at this age, we are changing. We're trying to find who we are. We should know that if a person do drugs, isn't a good person to be around with us. We can be friends with someone that is part of a gang because at some point they're gonna tell you, you should join the gang. If you do this, you are going to get money. You're going to be cool. Everyone is gonna respect you. But we don't think that at the end you're earning problems. What I can do to reduce youth violence is try to help. What I mean with this is if I know someone that is doing drugs or is part of a gang or is thinking to join these things, to think really good what they are going to do or they are doing. Because doing these things is like a cycle that goes over and over and never ends. And tell them the consequences. If you do drugs, you're going to feel good at the beginning, but a few months later, you're going to get addicted to this. And if you don't have money, you're going to start stealing. So you can get money to buy the drugs, and at the end, it's gonna end in killing you. And if you're part of a gang, think your family is going to be in danger. Why? Because if you don't obey them, they already know everything about you. And if you run away, your family is gonna pay for it. My advice is that don't let people influence you or do things that you don't wanna do. Because at the end, the one that is getting more hurt is you. And so if you're doing drugs, ask for help. And if you're a gang, think what are you doing. Even if you feel like you need to talk to someone, talk with your parents or someone that is going to tell you the right thing to do. Because if you keep doing this, at the end, you're gonna get more hurt than what you're doing right now. And the consequences are worse. Because in this world, what you do is what you get.
A lot of wisdom in the words of Stormy and Brenda. Now, Wyatt Engel. Wyatt is from the 8th grade in Austin, Texas, Westridge Middle School. Wyatt?
You said the first prompt is about how violence has affected my life, but I'd like to rephrase that. How hasn't violence affected my life? Violence is everywhere and affects my friends, my thoughts, and everyone on this planet. The definition of violence from Merriam-Webster is a great destructive force or energy. This implies that violence falls into the category of physical violence and mental violence. I've been abused mentally before many times, and so it's almost made me do some things I know I'd regret. I've been called an idiot, a weakling, a retard, and other names I can't remember. Usually I don't let these names get to me, but sometimes it really affects the way I think. I know it's stupid that it gets to me, but I can't help it. Once I was told I was worthless and I'd never go anywhere in life, it really made me think about suicide. I planned to kill myself just because some people thought it'd be delightful to make fun of my insecurities relentlessly. I realize now that I was just being crazy for thinking that would work and would be a good solution, but in that moment, I really wanted to end my own life. I've learned recently that people can't hurt me with petty insults and small, stupid assaults anymore, but if they hurt my friends, it feels as if something has shoved a knife into my gut. I want to write this paper because I want to stop seeing good people getting hurt because of someone else. I want to see violence removed from the face of the earth. But I believe in something most people don't. Violence can't be stopped. It can be weakened. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but I also know why it can't be stopped. Human psychology is probably one of the most fascinating things you could ever learn about, in my opinion, and it answers the causes of violence perfectly. Humans are social creatures with complex thinking processes and a wide variety of emotions, but it doesn't take a genius to realize we express some emotions through violence. Humans become angry when they perceive something as a threat to their mental or physical health. It's how we've stayed alive, if you think about it. Back in the Ice Age, we were forced to kill, steal, commit violent acts at a very young age if we want to stay alive. Violence can come from history, genes, and all sorts of things, but there are also animal instincts and respect. We humans forget that we are also animals, not godly beings among other less evolved species. We may fight for territory, food, and other resources because even though we're the most evolved species on the planet, we're still just animals who strive to survive. We also do have some people who will fight for respect. Many children thirst for respect, and those who don't might pay with it with a few punches. Now, after all those reasons why we can't solve violence, I'd like to present a few ways we can lower the amount of it. We could easily do what people are doing now with our schools and education, but that'll take generations of people before it comes into effect, which we may not have time for. I believe that without medicine, we could be more serious about teaching why violence is wrong to the smaller children in preschool and kindergarten. Children are more impressionable at the younger they are, which would make teaching them not to fight much easier than teaching someone my age. This would in turn make it so the next generation doesn't fight as much, but we'll still have rule breakers and people with mental illnesses that will beat down on people or even kill them. There is no perfect system to end physical violence, but there can be for mental violence, in my opinion. Most children, if they want to insult someone, will do it over the internet, where a victim cannot retaliate easily. This leads to cyberbullying, where people may post private information about the victim, insult the victim, and even hack the victim's online accounts to say something they would not normally say. I say we should make cyberbullying against the law. Both these ideas would help solve violence. The problem is that we can't solve it all. Violence can't be stopped, but it can be less common than it is now.
Our last reader, and I hope I pronounce your name right, is Asta Ladani, 7th grader, St. Bernadette Catholic School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Youth violence. It's a topic that has haunted America for the past few years and is getting worse. On the news, we constantly hear about juveniles committing crimes so serious they are sent to jail for a big part of their lives. Every day, it seems as if more and more young adults are making choices that they will regret in the future. We have become so accustomed to hearing about youth violence that we don't stop and ask ourselves why youth violence occurs. First, I would like to talk about a tragedy that occurred in my community. On April 9, 2014, a sophomore student ran through Franklin Regional High School with knives and stabbed 21 people. He was subdued by the assistant principal and a student and taken into police custody. Fortunately, nobody died during the stabbing, but it shocked and scared a lot of people. That incident was the closest I've ever been to youth violence. I've seen that in the past few years, security measures in public buildings, especially schools, have been tightened. More security cameras are put up. Metal detectors have suddenly appeared in high schools. Parents became more protective, and many efforts were put into measure to seize youth violence. I think the question we should be asking is not how can we stop youth violence, but why does youth violence occur? If we know the answer to the why, then we can answer the how. Youth violence occurs because of many reasons. In my opinion, the biggest reason is bullying. Nonstop harassment from peers does a lot of scary things to a child. Fortunately, a lot of people have seen the disastrous aftermath of bullying and have started to alert the public about it. When a child is harassed over and over, they start becoming depressed. Some children are bullied to the extent that they develop psychological problems that make them do things that they would not do otherwise. Bullying is a big topic that is a huge cause of youth violence. We have covered why youth violence occurs, and now we can discuss how we can stop it. The best way to fight youth violence, in my opinion, is to talk with your children. Parents know their own child best. Spend 5 to 10 minutes each day with your children and ask them how the school day went. Tell them to inform you if something isn't right and they need help. The connection between parents and their children will strengthen over time and will allow them to feel comfortable discussing violence and other related issues. Lastly, parents should monitor what their children do on technology. Help your child make safe choices on social media and talk to other adults in your children's lives that have a strong impact on them. Most importantly, if you see your child supporting or committing violent acts, sit down and gently explain the consequences that youth violence could bring to their future. Tell them that you're proud of his or her accomplishments and how youth violence can harm them. Find out what caused your child to support or commit violent acts. Yelling at them or grounding them might make them even more determined to lash out at others. I hope that you found my essay enlightening on the ever-broadening topic of youth violence. My hope is that using these strategies, less kids are attracted to committing violent acts and more people are informed about youth violence. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to invite the other three readers to come up, and we'll do the presentation of the book to the Library of Congress. So if the other three could come up, Stormy, Wyatt, and where is she? Yeah. Okay, Pamela? Let's go over here. We also have, Pamela, for you, that's it, we give this to Pamela. This is a collection of the book with all the students have signed it. Okay, now we have, go ahead and take your seats. Thank you, Pamela. We have a special speaker, a man who has spoken here in the past. I think we were counting it up today, 4 or 5 times, and has become a good friend of me, and mine, and of our program. David Esquith, who's sitting over here to my left, represents the Secretary of Education. If I'm correct, David, we have a new Secretary of Education now, is that right? And you can talk a little bit about the new Secretary if you would, but David has been a public servant for most of his life, started life as a lawyer, decided to give that up and actually do something positive, and went into government, and has worked in government in many capacities. Oh, I forgot to mention, when he was young, he was a Peace Corps volunteer, which gives you an idea of the type of personality that David has. He really is, he has 5 children, but what he cares about is people with problems and trying to find innovative ways to help them solve those problems through the government. He's one of the people I admire who have put their entire life into being a public servant here in Washington, D.C. And he currently heads the Office of Safe and Healthy Students. So David, representing the Secretary of Education, will speak to us now.
Good morning, and thank you, Dan, and thanks to all of you. This is one of my favorite events, and I've read through all of the writings, and every year I'm just incredibly impressed by the honesty and the thoughtfulness and the courage that all of you have exhibited engaging in this program, and I really have a lot of affection for this program. I think it surfaces important issues, and just as importantly, it surfaces solutions. And so I always take a chance. I prepare a PowerPoint, and I prepare this before I do the readings. It's just I try to get it done a little bit ahead of time. And I always worry a little bit when I read through the book that I've missed the mark, that there are there's wisdom in these writings that I've missed, and that when I present to you, I will there'll be a certain dissonance between what I say and what you've written, and I hope this year that what I say is consistent with what you've written, because I think you have great insight into the experience of many kids around the country, and so my sincere congratulations to all of you. So that's the name of this presentation. That's my title. I do want to correct Dan. I'm not a lawyer. I was never a lawyer. I was a special education teacher, and very proud of that, and have worked in the educational system at one level or another all my life, and not only appreciate the experience that you all have as students, but I know there are a number of parents in the audience, and parents go through school too. Every time they have a kid, they go through K through 12 again and again and again. And I do. I've got 5 children and 5 grandchildren. So I've been through kind of teenage years myself, and I'm going to go through another round. And you know, someone told me once, and it just keeps resonating with me, that parents are a sorry lot. You know, it's just really hard to be a good parent all the time, and I know that you all kind of appreciate the love and dedication that you must feel from your parents, particularly those who are kind of with you today on this trip. So What do I do? This is the portfolio of the Office of Safe and Healthy Students. And I put it up there so that you can get an idea of kind of the, not so much what my office does, but the range of issues that kids in schools are facing these days. And it is a long list, it's a complicated list. So we deal with, and bullying and cyberbullying is a constant theme in so many of your writings. But we also deal with school shootings and drug abuse, gang violence, teen dating violence. My office administers the homeless youth program, as well as a neglected or delinquent youth program. We deal with natural disasters, hurricanes and tornadoes. The bottom four are things that are kind of emerging issues that my office is doing a lot of work with other agencies, particularly the FBI, Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice on recruitment of young people by violent extremists, sextortion, suicide, and human trafficking. And so I share this list with you to illustrate just the complex problems that schools are facing every day, while at the same time trying to provide the highest quality education that they can to all their students and promote their academic performance. Lots of challenges here. And as I said, I think some of you in your writings have really touched on many of the key variables that will be our path forward to deal with this. So, how safe are our schools? And you know, one of the things that one of the impressions that you get going through the writings is that you know, the lives and the world that you all experience are very violent and threatening, and I certainly kind of recognize on an individual basis that that is certainly the case. But I'm also from the Department of Education, so I'm going to inject a math problem here to kind of illustrate my point. So put on your thinking caps and listen carefully to the math problem. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Raise your hand if you think you know the answer. Yes, ma'am. Nice and loud. 10 cents. That was kind of the answer I was looking for, but it's not the right answer. And how many of you thought it was 10 cents? Let's have a quick raise of hands. So a lot of people. And what you were doing is you were thinking very fast, right? You were thinking very fast. It seems like the obvious answer. A bat and a ball together costs $1.10. The bat costs more than the ball. It's got to be 10 cents. It seems like the obvious answer, but what you didn't do is kind of think statistically through the problem. So does anybody now have the correct answer? Yes, sir. I think you've got the right answer in there. The answer is the ball costs a nickel. Because if the ball costs a nickel and the bat costs $1 more than the ball, then the bat would cost $1.05, and together they would add up to $1.10. So what's the point? The point is that despite our kind of personal experience in thinking fast, we also have to think statistically. And kind of as you all become leaders in your communities and solve problems, you have to kind of move outside of your own personal experience to understand kind of the nature and extent of the social problems that you face in your community and in schools. So the answer to how safe are our schools is that schools are safer and crime rates are declining. That if you compare 1992 to 2014, we've had an 82% decline in students experiencing victimization at schools, and that the percentage of public schools that reported students being bullied at least once a week decreased from 29% to 16%. This is a graphic display of kind of the victimization at school between 1992 and 2013, a clear decline. The big takeaway on kind of schools across the country is that schools are safer than they've ever been. It's important to recognize that. At the same time, there's important work that needs to be done. Here are some examples. 25% of middle school students experienced bullying in 2012, 2013. So that's 1 out of 4. That's a lot. And this is actually the statistic that is more concerning to me. 50% of those incidents were not reported to an adult. So you've got 1 out of 4 kids who experienced bullying, and 50% of those kids did not report it to an adult. And many of you in your essays talk about why things are not reported to adults. And I think the primary culprit, and really this falls on adults, is that when you reported it, they didn't do something to take care of the problem, that adults failed you. And that is something that we as adults have to own up to. The other is that you're afraid that, or hoping that it'll go away, and that if you report it, it will bring attention to the issue, and it'll only make matters worse. And I want to say something about bullying, just to kind of give you some insights, because a number of you in your essays talk about bullying, and one of the questions that I think you ask yourselves is, why do bullies do this? Many times in your essays you said to the person who is bullying you, why are you doing this to me? And a number of you kind of hit the nail right on the head, that we know 2 things about kids who bully other kids. One is that they're being abused at home or in their own lives. They are victims of abuse. The other is that they are doing it to gain social status. They are kind of if you kind of divide kind of the social hierarchy into thirds, they're at the bottom of that middle third, and they're afraid of falling into the lower tier, into the bottom third of their peer group. They're actually afraid of becoming the kids who will be bullied. And so what you see in both cases, 1, they're victims of abuse, and 2, they're scared kids. And I know that bullies don't come across as scared, but lots of kids, and I'm going to get to this, lots of kids who engage in violent behavior are doing so out of fear. Even though they act tough and they're big and bad and they seem like they're not afraid of anything, underneath that kind of veneer is a great deal of fear. Here's something else that's a big concern to us in schools. That in 2011-12, 10% of public school teachers reported being threatened with injury by a student from their school in the previous 12 months. And that in the same year, 6% of public school teachers reported being physically attacked by a student from their school in the previous 12 months. This is a very serious statistic that we count on teachers. Teachers are kind of the linchpin in the whole system. If 1 out of 10 has been threatened and 6 out of 100 have been attacked, how do we expect teachers to be effective and comfortable and engaging with their students? So the takeaway from these statistics are, number 1, schools are safer than they've ever been. But number 2, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. What's the work that needs to be done? And this is a question that I get all the time. As the director of the Office of Safe and Healthy Students, I'm often asked, what are the biggest threats to school safety? And I want you to kind of ask yourselves that, and if you have a good idea, raise your hand. Take a moment to hear from anyone who might be willing to identify what they think are the biggest threats to school safety. Any of our authors want to take a chance and take a guess on this? Or it's not a guess. What is your opinion? Because this is just my opinion. Nice and loud. Can you stand up, please? Nice and loud. Very good. Good answer. Anyone else? Yes, nice and loud, please, so that everyone can hear it. I'm sorry? People lashing out at others by using weapons. Very good answer, and I think that's certainly true. What I'm looking for here are kind of the underlying causes. What are the underlying causes, and what are the biggest threats to school safety? One more. Yes, nice and loud, please.
Sometimes when they have like problems, their own personal problems, it affects them, and then they use alcohol or they use weapons to try to act cool or just try to lash out at others, using your words, to just show, to get it all out and just show like that they're angry at something.
Would you like to come and work for the Department of Education? Because that is a great, great answer, and pretty much where I'm going with this as well. So thank you. Here's what I think are the biggest threats to school safety that we face based on what we know. Loneliness, fear, and hopelessness. When you have students who are terribly lonely, who are terribly afraid, and in my opinion, probably the most powerful of these characteristics, when they are feeling hopeless, they are a risk to themselves and to others. And that in order for us to kind of get at the behaviors, kind of the violent behaviors, we have to get at these experiences that these students are having. And so, what happens when students are lonely? Where are we seeing this kind of manifest? We're seeing it in gang involvement. People are looking for connections. They're looking for those relationships. We see it in abusive relationships. This is a particularly significant problem with young girls who are coming up into middle school and getting into high school, and they get involved in abusive relationships. And somehow they think those abusive relationships, when we've studied kind of what they're experiencing, they think that's the norm. They think that being in an abusive relationship is somehow normal. They might be seeing it at home, or they don't have any other norms, but they are lonely and looking for that connection, that personal connection. We see it in violent extremism. As I said, I've been doing a lot of work around this lately, and you have young people who are becoming radicalized. They're sitting in front of their on their computer, and they are getting picked up by these predators who are out there looking to offer them something that doesn't exist, but it gives them a connection with something. And human trafficking is the same thing. And when I talk about human trafficking, what we're experiencing in schools, particularly are young girls being recruited into prostitution by gangs, which is a significant problem in virtually every part of the country. So these are some of the kind of the traps that people can fall into if they are lonely. Fear. Many of you kind of talked about some kind of concepts and principles in school psychology. And you may be familiar with this idea that when you are afraid, you experience kind of one of two emotions. You experience either fight or flight. You're afraid, and your reaction is to get in a kind of an aggressive mood to fight with kind of the person or persons who is scaring you, or there's flight. You leave, you run away, and those are kind of the two basic responses to fear. So what do we see in fight? And this gets back to the point I was making before about bullying. You have bullying and cyberbullying, and you have school shootings. What we know about so many active shooter situations is that, number one, it is kind of an act of suicide. And number two, these are individuals who have been living with a great deal of kind of fear and alienation their entire lives. And then there's flight, We have runaways and drug abuse and dropouts, and the department has done a study of absenteeism. And it's kids avoiding school. Sometimes they avoid school because they're afraid to go to school and losing out on their education. So you've got kind of that second characteristic. And then third is hopelessness. And as I said, this is just my personal opinion, but I think it is kind of the most powerful and destructive emotion. That if you have someone who is feeling genuinely hopeless, and that is a kind of a stark reality, they are prone to suicide or drug abuse or, again, kind of dropping out, just kind of giving up. Young people giving up on their education is just kind of a shame and a pity that with their whole future in front of them, they don't see any future, and they drop out. So, how do we combat loneliness, fear, and hopelessness? I have two girls, Sally and Daisy, who are 10 years old. And when I think it was this year, kind of the end of the year, I was just curious, and I said to Sally, Sally, who's your favorite teacher of all the teachers that you've had from kindergarten through fourth grade? And she responded like that. She said, Miss Jones. Miss Jones is my favorite teacher by far. And I asked her why. What was it about Miss Jones? And what she said was that Miss Jones believes in everyone, which is really a very, very profound statement. I mean, this idea of believing in everyone, of a teacher believing in everyone in that classroom, that they all have something positive to say, they all have a contribution they could make, and from the top of the school roster down to the bottom of it. That was Miss Jones. And Sally knew it. And Sally kind of falls, you know, she's not at the top and she's not at the bottom, but she knew that Miss Jones believed in everyone in that class. And for her, that was kind of the highest compliment you could make to a teacher. So how do we do this? There's a person who I admire, and if any of you have a chance to read any of his work or follow anything he does, called Brian Stevenson, whose name is Brian Stevenson. And one of the things that Brian does, he's a lawyer, so I'm going to say a good thing about a lawyer here, Dan. And he defends people who are on death row, and is a death penalty opponent because statistics prove that it's not a matter of kind of whether it's the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do, but the system is so out of whack that it disproportionately leads people of African American descent and color to their death disproportionately. Said that 1 out of every 9 persons who is on death row has been exonerated. Think about that. And one of the things that Brian says is that if 1 out of every 9 planes crashed, how many of us would get on an airplane? So one of the things, so the people have asked Brian, because some of these crimes are heinous, and some of these individuals just look like they have, you know, absolutely, there's no socially redeeming quality about any of these individuals. And one of the things that Brian says, and I think it's an important lesson to kind of, as you put this mosaic together, is that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. And I think that kind of captures some of this idea of believing in everyone. I think the other thing that has to happen, you know, the Greeks had 2 sayings. The Greeks, which was a pretty good civilization that lasted a long time and served as the foundation for so much of what we do today, they had 2 kind of idioms that they lived by. One was everything in moderation, which is really a very good idiom. The other was know thyself. That in order for us to find the good and believe in everyone, we first have to really kind of know ourselves and our own prejudices and our own biases and what pushes our buttons, so that when we encounter someone who's not necessarily a highly desirable individual, who may have a lot of challenges that are manifesting themselves in doing things that are wrong and bad, we're able to kind of separate ourselves and know ourselves from our ability to try to promote what is good in them. And I think this third quality is what Sally was talking about, is if we can see the strength in everyone, that everyone has strengths. We all have weaknesses. Everyone here has a weakness. Everyone here has flaws. But when we look at an individual and see their strength and see what is positive about them and nurture it, as opposed to seeing their problem that we want to fix, then we're on our way towards helping that person avoid loneliness, fear, and hopelessness. And finally, and this is really kind of more directed to the adults, that we have to build trust with young people, and we have to keep that trust. And so building that trust means being there when we're needed. And keeping that trust means kind of following up on our word, that when a young person comes to us and tells us that they've been bullied, that we don't drop the ball, and that we follow up and do as much as we can to keep them safe, but also kind of resolve the bullying in as positive a way as possible. And so I want to conclude by just kind of making this simple remark. Number one, again, I'm just so impressed and congratulate all of you for everything that you've done. And I hope that some of the things that I've shared with you today, you kind of take back to your communities to help kind of to see the good in everyone, and as challenging as that may be. And I think in the long run, if all of us do that, we will see a significant reduction in the violence that we all face. So thank you all very much.
As we mentioned last night, our primary and long-term founding sponsor for the program is the Kuwait America Foundation. Fauzi Sultan is a very close friend and vice chairman of the Kuwait America Foundation. I'd like Fauzi to present to David two books. One is for David and one is for the new Secretary of Education, containing the writings of our students. So if you'll do that, Fauzi, thanks. Thank you, David. Thanks, Fauzi. Okay, you weren't a lawyer. Somehow that was lodged in my mind, but I think it was actually because good lawyers, I hope, really, really, really try to understand the world that their clients are facing and truly understand the problem so they can be of help. I think that is one of your greatest strengths, David. Just listening to you speak today, I think we could all understand how much time you spend really thinking about human nature and what are the root causes of the problems that we humans have and that we visit on one another. And so, I just thought it was a brilliant job you did today, and appreciate all the work you're doing for all of us in trying to keep our schools safe and our children safe.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.